In this module, in several of the previous videos, we have been repeatedly mentioning that the only way to improve productivity is to eliminate waste from the processes. The just-in-time methodology, in a way, deliberately exposes waste and problem areas in an organization. We need a great understanding of the current process to identify where the problem is and what the likely opportunities are for improvement. So at some stage, it is inevitable that we dig into a process in a fair amount of detail. We cannot avoid that. A process mapping exercise will help us understand the potential areas for improvement. Process mapping is an exercise in which various steps in the process are chronologically identified and listed down. And once these steps are identified, it can be used to also find out what is the time spent, what kind of resources are consumed in the process, and to what extent all these are possible. So creating a suite of this information is invariably the first step in waste elimination. We shall take an illustrative example of a process mapping exercise to understand this in some detail. What you see here is the process mapping done in the case of a particular subassembly of a product. This was done because there was this feeling that this subassembly is taking too much time, lead times are too large, it is creating a problem to the final assembly and therefore in the market and so on. So in response to that, a process mapping exercise was done. As you see here, there are categories of items which have been identified. You have WT, which means waiting. MV means, you see MV here, MV means moving. And then there is a category called adding value. There is another category called adding cost. So what you see in this table is the chronological order in which this particular subassembly is getting manufactured in that particular factory. It captures what is the nature of the activity, who has the responsibility, and then, as I already said, what category does it belong to. For example, step 1 says progress department generates material request for raw material done by the centralized production planning control department, and it's just waiting. The category is nothing is happening to it, so we call it as waiting. Step 2 is material request given to shop floor. We have skipped a few steps. Whenever we have skipped a step, we have indicated it by this gray scale that you see here, because I didn't want to list the whole thing and make it too complicated, because there are 81 activities in all, so we have skipped a few of them. So what you find is material request takes it to purchase and then checks the stock of items, whether can they issue it and so on. Then the item is moved to the first place where it has to be processed. The moving happens here. Raw material is moved. There is another moving activity here. So there is a flame cutting operation which is happening, which is adding value, which means this is the operation to be done. All others are steps required in order to carry out this operation. Then there is an interesting operation called adding cost. Why? Because it is reworking. This flame cutting is not done properly, so it's a rework. It is moved to a short blasting area and then its finish is improved. So this is adding cost because rework. So it goes on like this. You have listed up to 36 activities here, 40, 41 and so on. In all there are 81 activities before this is completed and moved to the fabrication area where final processing is done. So this is a typical process mapping exercise in which we list all activities one after the other. Perhaps we identify who is responsibility it is, what category of activity is this, and so on. Let us see the summary of this. That makes an interesting reading. The table has the summary. So these 81 activities that we mapped, 53 of them belong to the category of waiting. And in all it took about 1998 hours, which contributed to 65% of the total time. It's just 6.3% which adds value, which is about 106 hours. And the rest are all things for which if you use our terminology that we discuss in this module, then what we are saying is 6.3% is all that customer is willing to pay, and for the remaining 93.7% customer does not want to pay. So out of 1680 hours, which is sort of lead time, this is a lead time for this batch of components, the effective work is only 106 hours. The rest are all something is happening which is not adding any value from the customer's perspective. So whenever we do the process mapping, this is the kind of information that we can get out of the exercise. Now it's easy to find that this exercise could indeed be the basis for improving the process by eliminating the waste in this example. The activities that are contributing for waste could be identified for possible elimination. Then one can launch a detailed scrutiny as to why are we doing this? What are the various factors that have contributed for the waste? So in other words, we have dipped into a process, created the snapshot of the process in fair amount of detail.